and I'm live. Am I getting a notification though?
I'm live too.
Good on you, mate. We got someone here in the chat. That's good. Hey people, how's it going? It's 6:38 p.m. New Zealand time, Sunday evening. Hey, Sonia, she got a notification. That's good. That's good, Sonia. That's good that you got a notification, because that means for some reason YouTube is working. But what's interesting though is that I don't get notifications for some shows, and then on other shows I get them. So it's good that Sonia got one. I think YouTube's been having some problems, to be fair. Anyway, what have you been up to, buddy?
Oh, just typical day at the office. Yeah, just open homes and miscellaneous.
That's good.
Joseph Parker.
Yeah. I think it's all over Rover.
Yeah, he reminds me of David Tour. He's like, small population, Samoan guy, tough guy. But when it comes to the big time, wow, it's a different level, isn't it? Clyde, no cigar.
Yeah, so what Carl's talking about is boxing. New Zealand has a boxer called Joseph Parker, who was a contender up until about 3 hours ago.
Yeah.
So we've got a couple of watches, so that's good. I've got a couple of things here that I want to talk about that aren't specifically stones related, but still related to the theme that we're talking about. So I'll throw those in soon. So Sonia's saying YouTube has been implementing some new features like the anonymous viewing, which looks like something that might be abused to me. Oh, that's interesting. Does that sound like Big Brother or something? You getting phone calls again, buddy?
Yeah. Same thing. I've lost my face. I can't see myself.
Okay. Every time we do a show, people ring you. Maybe we should just invite them onto the show, into the chat, get them into the chat.
I'm a bit concerned. I've just lost. I've lost my face. I can't see myself.
No, just have a fiddle around with your settings. You'll be fine. You'll find it.
Okay.
You'll find it. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, I'm going to show my Telecaster, because I've got a couple of messages from... There you are. Okay, so I'm just going to show my Telecaster. So one of the guys in the chat, I forget his name. Anyway, we're talking about custom vibe guitars. And a guy called Mark, who does some wonderful tutorials. My Blues Guitar is his channel. I'll put a link to his channel after this show, and you guys can check him out. His tutorials on some classic British blues tunes is outstanding, and he's run a couple of videos playing a couple of Derek and the Domino tunes, and he's using a 50s custom vibe Stratocaster, and I think the only thing that he's done to it is change the block, which is like a thin block that it comes with a proper Stratocaster block. But other than that, it sounds wonderful. When he's playing through Garage Band, which is an app, and it's just amazing. So yeah, I'll put the link for you guys to check out what he does. But this is my 50s. This is a 50s Telecaster, and Carl's seen this. But this is my 50s Telecaster, Mark, that I've relicked to look a little bit like Keith's. So it's permanently set up in OpenG. The only thing, though, that I haven't done, obviously, is put in a PAF. But that's definitely a modification on the cards, just to make it look at least a little bit authentic. But yeah, I can't rate them high enough. You know, they're good guitars. And when I remember, I'll bring my 60s Strat, which is at work, in and show that off next week. That's nice. Thanks, Sonia. So anyway, buddy, Stones riffs.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just want to let everybody know I really appreciate Andrew's his dedication to making this a consistent thing, and all the people around the world. I just want to say thank you for tuning in. And I've spent years watching YouTube videos, and I've always been on the other end. I've been watching. Now I'm actually participating, so it's about time. So just goes to show you that, you know, I mean, I've got so much enjoyment about other people, their input, their motivation. I actually feel good giving back because we've all got something to share.
Oh, I know. I want to echo what you say, because it's really pleasing to see some of the comments from people. You know, Mitch from R2, R3, from Ben, from Sonia, to a couple of our Canadian friends. It's really pleasing to get, you know, helpful and polite and positive comments. And it's always going to be a theme of what Carl and I do. We appreciate that, and we don't want world domination. We're just quite keen to talk about what we want to talk about, and if other people find that enjoyable and want to participate, that's what it's about. But we like the positive way that it's done too. You know, we've said that before. You know, musicians and music fans have a responsibility, and they can clean up social media, because as we've said before, you know, people just quickly jump on and are quick to kick people in the guts.
Yeah, it's unnecessary.
So no, good on you, Carl. Good on you.
Yeah, no, thanks. No, I just, you know, like I said, I've got many years of enjoyment watching other people's input, and I really appreciate Andrew lighting a fire up my thing and saying, you know, let's do something. So here we are. But the continuation of the Stones riffs, we're in that middle period, because I'm going through their career from, you know, start to where I think their finest period, I think, of 30 years in the business. But I'm at the stage now where it's 1976, the year I was born. Guitar Player's Audition album. So if you actually own the album, it's actually quite a neat inner sleeve where it shows you all the engineer and the producer writing who was on which track and who did what and who overdubbed, and it was actually very good. Actually, I should show you. Just hold the line.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Grab it. Cool.
Actually, the days of my records being in order are not in order now, so it might take hours to find.
Hey, Johnny Bean, thanks for saying hi to Carl and I. Always appreciate you jumping in, because, like I've said it before, you're the granddaddy.
Yeah, no, good. Hi there. How you doing? But I was thinking about this before. So with the album Black and Blue, we see the Rolling Stones not necessarily unfamiliar territory, but a band that is always humble to try different things and adapt to what's going on. So this is pretty much their reggae album. But along with some reggae, there's a little bit of funk and a bit of groove in there. So my first lick or riff or whatever you want to call it, and it's actually quite easy to play, but it's just so so contagious, it's so groovy, so effective as hot stuff.
Mm.
It's a neat little hook, nice little riff, simple, and that's what the Stones are known for. So yeah, out of that particular album, and that, you know, we see the Stones obviously very comfortable, knowing that they're very good at rock and roll. Obviously, not cutting their teeth with the blues and trying R&B, but here they're trying a bit of reggae and funk, you know. So it's not easy to try different, you know, go into uncharted waters, and they pull it off really well.
Who's Harvey Mandel who played guitar on that song?
He's an American guy from Chicago. And he was involved with Charlie Musselwhite, so he was part of that Mike Bloomfield late '60s Chicago blues scene, white boy blues.
Yeah.
And he was involved with a bit like a Jeff Beck, a bit of a kind of shun the spotlight, but a heavyweight of a musician, very 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 bluesy and very bit like a Roy Buchanan, could do multiple things. So. Beautiful guitar player. I mean, some of those solos on Black and Blue are amazing. Hand of Fate, that's one of them.
Yeah, I always thought that Hot Stuff was a funky tune. You know, Nile Rodgers, you know, would be proud of that. You know.
Yeah, it just goes to show you, like, because that middle period, we had Sly and the Family Stone, you had Stevie Wonder. You had Parliament Funkadelic. You had obviously reggae was big. Bob Marley, Peter Tosh, and the Rolling Stones, by the way, were friendly with all them. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
So was Harvey Mandel ever considered for a replacement after Mick Taylor?
I think that I think there was 3 guitar players on that album, wasn't there? I think the fact that he was actually playing on that album, he was very seriously considered.
I just want to shout out to Simon, our friend Simon, who's in Spain. I think he said last night he's got 1 week of holiday vacation time left, so enjoy those few days, Simon. We were talking in the Johnny Bean show about a DVD, so I'm glad that Simon's popped in. This is the DVD, Simon, that I forgot the title of, that you made reference to. But this DVD, if anyone is a Zeppelin fan and hasn't got this DVD, or anyone who loves, you know, classic rock or British blues, this DVD is mandatory. It's awesome. So Simon's in Spain until Thursday, and Simon's going to join us in late
August.
Can't wait for that. We've got a heck of a load of questions for you, Simon, and make sure you've got all your guitars handy. Cheers. Anyway, carry on, buddy. I'm sorry. I just wanted to have a shout out to Simon.
Yeah, I forgot my train of thought.
Sorry.
Harvey Mandel. Yeah, he just says he was born in Detroit but was raised and grew up in Chicago. So obviously a lot like Mike Bloomfield, just surrounded by music and blues and clubs. And I actually own, this is a classic album. I recommend it to anybody. Stand Back, Here Comes Charlie Musselwhite's Southside Band. So Charlie,
is that the album that Harvey is playing guitar on?
He plays on the whole album, yeah.
Okay, I need to, if you can just give me a couple of seconds while I find that, because I'm going to put that in Spotify and check that out.
Yes.
So Charlie Musselwhite.
There's a famous song that became Charlie Musselwhite's signature song, which is a jazz standard. It's called Cristo Redentor.
Cristo Deddor.
Cristo Redentor. Christ the Redeemer.
Ah.
Very interesting. But
as usual, my connection here is pathetic. Sorry. Cristo Redemptor.
Yeah. It's an instrumental.
Let's see if I can find it here.
But along with, so what was happening in that mid-late 60s period, there was a nice follow-up to a famous album called Hoodoo Man Blues, which had Junior Wells and Buddy Guy. It was the first studio album done by blues players to capture the live sound in a studio. It's a classic album. This came out about 6 months later, but it was all white boys. I had Fred Below, black guy on drums, and I think might have had a black bass player. But that's when the world was introduced to Harvey Mandel. And along with Mike Bloomfield, did that jazz improv with the blues. So imagine with Mick and Keith's keen ears, they would have, obviously had their ear to the street and probably following him.
Okay, I'm sorry about this. I'm just trying to get that album that you're making reference to. So finally, Spotify is working. Cristo Redeem Tour. Here we go. The Best of the Vanguard Years. Is that the album?
Yeah. Well, it's not the album, but that would be a compilation.
Okay, so let's just go to View Artist and see what albums he's got on here. So what's the album that you're recommending, my friend?
Stand Back. Here Comes Charlie Musselwhite's Southside Band.
Holy cow, it's not on here. Okay, I'm going to have to do some research because it's got Stone Blues from 68. Charlie Musselwhite was a harp player. That's correct. Tennessee Woman, Memphis Charlie. Okay, so I'll do some research on that and the harmonica according to Charlie Musselwhite. So I will check that out.
Yeah. It just gives you a nice little a prelude into the white boy blues scene in Chicago, and it's got Mike Bloomfield. Very good. So Harvey Mandel was very much a serious contender on Black and Blue.
To take over after
well, obviously Mick Taylor left an invaluable mark, being the great lead guitar player. So they weren't going to get a chump. Weren't going to get anybody.
So Harvey recalls his sudden interruption into the world of the Stones. I was at home. Mick Jagger called me at midnight. At first I thought it was somebody goofing off at me. After a while I could tell it was really him. He said, I'd like you to fly to Germany tomorrow, the next day. And then he's on his way to Germany. Despite having a highly convincing performance and another on Memory Motel, Ron Wood would beat him for the job. Okay, so look, maybe, yeah, I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware actually that that Harvey was a serious contender.
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, listen to his work on that album. He's very tasty. Very tasty.
Plays a Les Paul Gibson too.
Yeah, but what the Stones being that English working class band, obviously it's a bit like anything. It's like when a New Zealander meets a New Zealander overseas, you just automatically just fall into New Zealand conversation. I think what sealed the deal for Ron Wood was the Hey Negrita song. Apparently, that was Ron's riff.
Hey Negrita.
Yep. And there was another guitar player. There was a serious contender on there, Wayne Perkins. Another American, Southern boy from Alabama.
So Ronnie playing that how do you pronounce it? Zemantis?
Don't know. Yeah.
It's the English guitar that's got mirrors, bits of mirror on it, diamonds or something.
Yep. Sorry, Hand of Fate was Wayne Perkins. That was he was doing the solo apparently. So yes, 4 guitar players on there. There's a couple of songs where Keith doesn't play guitar at all.
So where does that album sit in the canon with you? That whole album.
I love it. I absolutely love it. It's a sleeper, absolute sleeper. I love Memory Motel. I love Full to Cry. Melody's a swinging jazz song with a real laid-back beat. Crazy Mama, I Could Take or Leave. Hey Negrita sounds pretty good. It's a nice tone on that. I don't know what the hell. I don't know what kind of guitar Ron was using, but he got a nice tone.
So Full to Cry, which I absolutely adore too. One of the great things about the Stones that I fell in love with was the way that Mick can inject a character into his voice.
Yes.
And that's a classic song where he's injecting a character into his voice. But because we're guitar players as well, and it's a guitar orientated album, show, Wayne Perkins is playing lead guitar on that album, on that song.
Yeah. Yep. And you mentioned a good point about no one else sounds like Mick, which is great. But like Full to Cry, for example, he injects a lot of Americanism into his voice with his painting a picture with, New York and coming home after late night shift. And you can tell he paints a picture where you feel like he's in some kind of New York apartment and it's late night, it's raining. He's just that good. So, yeah. Incredible.
Yeah, so Simon's saying that Perkins played on 3 tracks on Black and Blue.
Yeah.
So what was Keith doing then? Was he playing acoustic or rhythm on that track, do you think?
He was doing a lot of, he was doing piano, bass, backing vocals, obviously, just a lot of filling in, really.
But do you think he was producing the album as opposed to being the guitar player on the album?
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely having a lot of a different kind of input. He took a back seat, really, because it wasn't a riff heavy album, really. There was a lot of grooves on there, imagine it was probably quite a busy album with all the different guitar players and trying to fill the void that Mick Taylor left. So it was very much a different kind of album.
So what about Ollie Brown? When Ollie Brown came in, so what songs did Ollie Brown play drums on? Was he playing drums on any of those songs, do you think, or was he just in the studio?
He was mainly employed for percussion, so he would have been doing a lot of kind of drum fill work, I guess. So yeah, definitely a very, very studio album. Like, you couldn't play that album live. Hard to play live. A lot of overdubbing. I used to own the poster. Huge poster. Loved it.
Yeah, it's an interesting album. I'm going to go back after this show and I'm going to listen to that album.
What's interesting is is we have that Jagger Richards bullying going on a little bit. I'm just looking at, like, for example, Hey Negrita was apparently all Ron Wood's creativity. It was his hook, his kind of groove, his feel. And it says here, inspiration by Ron Wood, not writer Ron Wood, inspiration. Same with melody. We talk about Billy Preston, we talk about Stevie Wonder, that Stones wouldn't have been able to come up with that without, someone else injecting that kind of feel. So once again, inspiration by Billy Preston. But as we know, and you've talked about this, that 75 tour, it got a little bit busy, didn't it?
What was that? Sorry, buddy?
We've talked about this before, that 75 tour was a bit busy. You had Ollie Brown and Billy Preston. Yeah, it was a pretty full stage.
Yeah, it's not my favourite tour. I've got the DVD of that 75 tour, and it's not my favourite tour. I'll watch it. There's some interesting stuff going on. One of the points I'd like to make is that, before I mentioned about how Mick has this theatrical aspect to his voice, and he brings a character into some of the songs. I think he goes overboard on that tour, as far as pushing that envelope of an actor.
Yeah, but too dramatic. I'm just trying to think. So when Mick Taylor left, Ron Wood was invited to do the tour, but wasn't necessarily a full-time member of the band. So when they cut Black and Blue, he was still on the shelf, really. He wasn't a permanent member. That's quite interesting, eh?
I don't think he became a permanent member until I can't recall. Well, it was a long time after he apparently officially joined the band. He was on wages, wasn't he?
Yeah. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, okay. Wow. So the album was released in 76, but the recording started 7th to 15th December 1974, early part of 75, and then March and April, a lot of overdubbing. So Ron Wood was basically a member of the band while he must have been employed. It's hard to say. I don't know if the 75 tour he was a bona fide member or not.
And it never reached number one. It was a number 2 album on the charts for 14 weeks.
Right.
That's interesting.
And their only hit song was Full to Cry.
Yeah.
Didn't have most of their albums. They definitely had a big song. That was an album where there was no big song.
Do you think that worried them?
I think they have a competitive nature for sure. I think they were used to having a big song on every album. But at that particular stage, Keith was heavy into the junk, and they were still packing arenas, packing tour. Still the band around the world. So, once again, we talked about this before. Mick did a great job of really holding it all together, Mick Jagger. But yeah, I think that was also the start of, like you said, the dramatic phase. But the Stones lost a little bit of a personal touch by becoming big, super big, arena band.
I wonder if I'll just see if Simon, Simon, if you're in the still watching the show, do you think the Stones picked Ronnie over and above these other guys because he was an English guy? Do you think that was the key component, as far as the Stones were concerned? Be interested to see what you have to say about that, because Carl alluded to that earlier, and I tend to agree with Carl. I think being English guys certainly was an aspect of their success and their chemistry.
Oh, well, we talked about It's Only Rock and Roll a week ago, and that was at Ronnie Wood's house, and Ronnie Wood, the faces were basically big time Stones fans. So it was like I mentioned before about that video, the VCR, which I wish they had on DVD, 25 by 5, and they were interviewing. Ron Wood was talking about this particular period about being hired and the excitement, and he'd bumped into the Stones at Hyde Park, and he would have been only 18, 19. And he said prophetically, they said, he said, have a good show. He saw Mick Jagger. Mick Jagger knew he was through his brother and through the Jeff Beck group. And Ron Wood said, yeah, you guys have a good show. One day I'll be there. And he kind of grinned, knowing that one day he'd be in the band 6 years prior. So it was always on his mind to be in the Stones. He got his chance. And the thing is, they ran in similar circles.
Yeah. And Keith was using his Telecaster on that album when he was playing guitar. Memory Motel. That's an interesting song, isn't it?
Yeah, based on a real life situation. It's a girl named Hannah.
And so again, what's interesting about the information I'm reading here, Carl Perkins, Wayne Perkins played the acoustic guitar on that.
Yep. Nice touch. There's some nice touches on there. Really nice touches. So here we are. The Stones are just incredible. Here they get a southern rock sound, country sound in France, of all places. Here they get a funk reggae sound that we think of the tropics and the Bahamas and Jamaica, and Germany, of all places.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter where the Stones are, they can pluck out a groove from another country in another country.
Yeah, it's amazing. So Simon's chucked in a comment here, mate. I think they picked Ronnie because he fitted in, got on with Keith, and played similarly to Keith. People like Jeff Beck, etc., were too much of a star. Well, look, I agree with you, and I'm going to echo a point that Carl made earlier in one of the earlier shows, where I think they realised that they were going to be a touring band, that they were going to play in stadiums, I think, and having somebody who was going to do that well was probably the most important thing. And Ronnie certainly could do that. He's got some of that work with the faces to prove that, hasn't he?
Yeah, and he had the rooster haircut and the skinny frame and the cigarette dangling out of the corner of his mouth and the ripped jeans and the croaky smile and croaky laugh. I guess it kind of helped him having a punky, edgy look. I always thought that everybody basically said it was Keith hired him as his little brother, his drinking partner. There's a little bit of selfish reasons going on, I think.
Oh, and I don't have a problem with that. I think if Keith wanted somebody that had a personality more than being a guitar player, virtuoso, and if that was the key component that he wanted, well, he certainly got it.
Mm.
But one of the DVDs that changed my opinion on Ronnie was that 81 tour, and they're playing Under My Thumb, and that they arrive on the stage playing it, and Ronnie's playing on a Telecaster. It's pretty good.
Mm. Mm.
He's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and there's hardly any bum notes on that DVD.
Well, there's a couple of things too. Also, is he with Mick Taylor and Keith Richards, you had Keith's rhythm holding down the fort that way, and then you had Mick Taylor's soaring, beautiful solos that way. So when Ron joined, and as Keith eloquently always mentions it, he calls it the ancient art of weaving. They think they got back to this again,
Yeah.
So that was the other reason, was he understood the fact that if Keith was I don't know, missed a chord, Ron was there to back it up, as opposed to Ron just doing the solo.
So what Ronnie did, Ronnie could pull back quickly as a guitar player, as opposed to, say, Mick Taylor. I like the fact that you're saying that he was soaring, so he'd lock on and he'd go this way, which is a great thing to do as a guitarist. But the key thing that you're saying for Ronnie is that Ronnie had the ability to pull back.
Yeah. Well, Keith,
and listen.
Keith always, the reason why the Stones became the Stones, because of Keith and Brian's interweaving, where they had a double chunky rhythmic sound, and they had just these tasty little solos. They weren't the greatest solo guitarists, but they got a lot of rhythm and swing out of a double rhythm sound. And Keith always liked that. I guess in a way, Keith didn't feel intimidated. And we talked about the fact that, the band being a family, and the family being this little gang. There was no one was better than the other. It was they all played as a band in unison. So I think Keith, deep down, I don't think was intimidated, but was a little bit skeptical of virtuosos. He didn't want to be in a nerdy band or a virtuoso band. He wanted to be in a rock and roll garage band. I think he never forgot where he came from, and he wanted to keep that going. And Ron Wood was the guy.
I'm just thinking about what you've just said. So, as a consequence of what you're saying, then Ron Wood's probably a key component to that whole album.
Black and Blue?
Yeah.
Well, he gave us a taste of what was to come, for sure, on that Hey Negrita. He had a style similar to Keith's, as far as, an edgy, rhythmic, chunky sound. And also, not to mention that Rod was a very clever pedal guitar player and slide player, which the Stones loved their slide, as we know, with Brian Jones and Mick Taylor. So he definitely ticked a lot of boxes as part of his resume, because the Stones obviously always loved going back to their roots, a little bit of blues or a bit of country, and so when it came time for pedal steel or slide, Ron Wood could do it. So yeah.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that stripped DVD, they re-released it a couple of years ago, and if you want to see Ronnie playing some brilliant slide, he does it really well on that album.
Yeah. Looking back, I like the 81 tour, and Keith was actually clean, I think, on that tour, and Ronnie had the problems.
Yes.
But he was freebasing a lot. But you are right, Ronnie on some nights could play really, really well. He wasn't. He was chalk and cheese with Mick Taylor. Let's face it, chalk and cheese. So the Stones sound changed a bit. We've got to admit that the sound changed. It definitely became a lot, I wouldn't say brighter, but very much a lot more Fendery.
I would say I would definitely say brighter. You listen to that 81 DVD, and yeah, well, clearly it is brighter because they're playing. Ronnie's playing a Telecaster, and he's playing through Fender amps. He's always been a Fender amp man, so yeah, the tone definitely changed, definitely. And
Yeah,
Simon agrees with you. He says I agree. Mick Taylor was the soloist and didn't play like Keith. Ronnie locks in with Keith, and you often can't tell who is playing what.
very
Yeah.
much. Like Start Me Up is a perfect example. But so they had obviously a big chunky sound, a chunkier sound. Yeah, and it's neat because I mean through the course of their long illustrious career, we've got to see three different guitar players, and they've all had a different touch, and they've all been equally brilliant in their own way. You know, Brian Jones was, as we know, a great slide player before slide players existed in little old England. And in the middle period, Mick Taylor's soaring, beautiful melodic solos, and then obviously the later period, Ron Wood. But it's it's hard to believe because they still think of Ron as the new guy. And if I was born 76, he joined 42 years ago. And he's the new guy. How does that work? Are they old? Are we young? Or are we young and they're old?
Well, they still say that because I just watched some YouTube clips where they're talking about the recent tour, and Keith makes reference to the new guy. But getting back to the sound, to the tone of that tour, of that early 80s period, I just remembered something. Keith was playing mezzo boogies. So and Keith was playing a tele and or a Strat that Simon makes reference to. So he wasn't playing through Fender amps. So if they were getting some crunch, it was certainly through those mezzo boogie amps. And if Ronnie was playing his Fenders through his Fender amps, that was the division between them, Fender amps versus mezzo boogies. What do you reckon?
I didn't know that. I did not know that. I knew that Keith flirted with mezzo boogies. I can't really comment because I've actually played a mezzo boogie in America, never owned one, but I was led to believe that the guy that started mezzo boogie used to work for Fender.
Mm.
So there was a lot of similarities. Mezzo boogie was just a bit more fancier, and obviously had a few more little added details, but still in its heart quite similar wiring.
I've played a couple of mezzo boogies over the years, and the great thing about the mezzo boogies, the early ones, is that they had a graphic equalizer on them as well, which was interesting. But I understood the mezzo boogies, they wanted them to break up much earlier, as opposed to like the Fender having to crank that baby up to crank, to overdrive it.
I see. Okay.
That's what I understood the mezzo boogies could do, that they could break up quicker, earlier.
Makes perfect sense because Keith loved that kind of sound. He loved that, and I love it, that kind of raw, garagey sound. Very, very interesting. I've put Ron Wood down. I love Brian Jones, love Mick Taylor, but I still like Ron Wood, just in a different way.
I'm going to echo what you've just said. Carl and I, for years, would make fun in a respectful way, people. But would put the needle in to Ronnie, but when I went back and revisited a lot of the stuff that Ronnie did, but what sealed the package for me is watching the DVDs, watching and actually seeing how he plays, and then listening to it, because as guitar players we have to see how someone's playing, and that tells a story in itself too, and just to see how good he actually was. So yeah, I agree with you, Carl. Yeah, I admire him too, but yeah, like you said, in a different way.
Yeah, I was a bit of a musician's musician. I liked the fact that Mick Taylor took a step back, shunned the light, got into a pocket, and just played these beautiful solos. And he wasn't running around the stage, so he was very introverted, where Ron was very much the extrovert, wasn't shy, was a fun guy. And Charlie Watts had mentioned that the Stones had got a bit stale, and Ron Wood, with his energy and his youth, kind of reinvigorated everything and was a catalyst in a way, got people talking to each other.
Yes, so Simon's mentioning again another point that we won't argue with him about. The accepted critics' view is that the best version of the Stones was with Mick Taylor, and that's my opinion too. That's my opinion. The best version of the Stones that I like is from '68 to '74. Those are my go-to albums. When I think of the Stones, that's what I think of, and then build from there. But there's one thing though that I think that we need to be clear of, and in this series that Carl and I and what people in the chat can offer is that, and we haven't got into a stage of bashing, which is great. But on some other YouTube shows that I watch, it's interesting how some people, for example, most people know that I'm a Van Halen nut, and it's interesting that people would side with David Lee Roth and just say all these nasty, vile, rude things about Sammy Hagar. You don't tend to get a lot of Sammy Hagar fans saying a lot of nasty, vile things about David Lee Roth. But I'd stand back, because I have a preference. I'd stand back and think, why would people say that? Because the band is Van Halen, and shouldn't you like the band in all its versions, including Gary Cherone? Yeah, that's just my view.
Yeah, I mean, going on to the next song, which obviously by now Ron Wood was a permanent fixture and a member and visual part of the Stones. I mean, he added some nice touches, and I'll jump ahead and I'll go into this. This is going to be my third choice, but it'll be my second choice to basically coincide with what we're talking about and the interweaving. It's a riff melody. Let's face it, it's not a chunky riff. It's a riff melody. Beast of Burden.
I love it.
I remember dating this girl in America. She was a really nice lady, Charmaine Richards. Actually, yeah, cool name. And I mentioned Rolling Stones, and she had the original 45 of Beast of Burden. It was her high school song. It reminded her of high school. So, incredible song. It just goes to show you once again how the Stones could just melt into a pocket of how would you describe that song? Like a ballad or a soft rock song, or but just beautiful guitar tone and just a great understanding of each other's rhythmic abilities. Less is more too. Just a lot of hammering on and hammering offs.
Classic Stones song.
Yep. And not much, and there weren't many soaring guitar solos either at that stage. They were doing a lot of just rhythm. And
is that because of Dance, dance was a big thing then.
Yeah,
Dancing.
yeah. It's almost like, and I might as well just coincide this with the next song, "Miss You." Disco was big, so "Miss You" was my other riff that I was going to pick. So both songs are very much. Mick Jagger was the sort of guy that would go out to all the New York clubs and listen to the DJs, what they were playing, and get a kind of get a feel for what was current, what was hip, the top 40. He wasn't being commercial. He was basically just keeping his ear to the street. Where Keith was very much a studio guy. He was more than happy just to have a half a bottle of Jack Daniel, a packet of cigarettes, and whatever else was around, and just fiddle with some buttons and play the guitar. So Mick, it's a very good relationship they had. Mick was very much in tune with what was happening in clubs. Keith couldn't stand that kind of atmosphere, but was more than happy to put it on wax. So, "Miss You" was a disco song. "Beast of Burden," same sort of thing.
Well, Keith's famous for saying, he loves the rock, loves the rock, loves the rock. But, you got to have their role, and so yeah, you're putting that stuff down on laying it down on vinyl, definitely, doesn't contradict anything that Keith Richards has told us.
No, and I admire that Mick was a fraction, not shallow or superficial, but Mick was very much wanting to keep his finger on the pulse. He knew that times were changing. In that particular album, "Some Girls," there was a bit of a punky edge to it too.
Well, it's interesting you should say that, because our friend Simon saying, getting into the punk disco era.
Yeah. The stuff at that stage were mid-late 30s and were considered dinosaurs. So,
yeah, I remember picking up about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, some new wave magazines. A friend had given me a pile of these magazines, and I remember taking them home, looking through them. They weren't guitar magazines, but there was an article on the Rolling Stones. I wish I kept it, because gosh, they just were ripping into the Stones, saying, who are these old coots? Yeah.
Oh yeah, codgers.
Old farts or something. Yeah. I wish I kept it. But clearly the person, the Joy Division fan who was writing the article was probably 20 years old, and anybody over 25 was.
Yeah. No, the Stones were definitely feeling like they were in competition, and they had something to prove. And with with the fact that they are the Stones, they could take on anybody. And look how long the Sex Pistols' career lasted. What, 2 albums?
2 minutes.
And let's face it, they had no talent.
Look, I like a lot of guys, I remember drinking some beers, when we were young, and never mind the bollocks, and EMI and God Save the Queen, but I remember being, I wasn't a snob, but I remember standing back thinking, there's nothing to this stuff.
Yeah, it reminded me a little bit. I mean, I know that a lot of people like the Ramones, but 3 power chords and a lot of shouting, and no break. I don't understand it. It's not for me. I mean, I know that they're probably pretty good. They sell a lot of records, but God bless the Rolling Stones for, we talk about God Save the Queen, but God bless the Rolling Stones for getting mud thrown at them and then throwing a lot of mud back and winning. Some Girls was their biggest selling album of all time.
Yeah.
When the whip comes down, and Respectable, I mean, and how we talked about, I'm glad we're actually talking about, there's actually, they all, this all interlies with each other. that tour, that little tour they did in '78, ladies and gentlemen, was it so that Some Girls Rolling Stone tour that they did, and they knew that '75 tour was a bit of a mess. Lots of people on stage, a lot of theatrics, too much stuff going on. They actually really wanted a stripped down sound. They only had the 5 guys in the band, small venues, small clubs, a small tour. They realised that, you know, they needed to get back to basics once again.
Oh, that's right. You know, Before They Make Me Run, I just, you know, off that album's just phenomenal, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely, and really good lyrics.
You know, and that's a stripped down. That's a stripped down sound, isn't it?
Yep, Keith, open tuning, not the greatest vocalist, but his style makes it work. Just real honest, really honest, very honest. So yeah, now that's my 3 riffy songs. Hot Stuff, which talks about the funk aspect of the Stones and the guitar audition and Ronnie cementing his place with Hey Negrita, and them getting the interweaving back with Miss You and Beast of Burden, which are classics. Let's face it. Sure, they're radio songs, but who cares?
I just want to go down a detour, if that's okay, because Simon's thrown in a couple of cool comments here about the fantastic energy that these 3-chord bands had, and they were Stones fans, and Johnny Rotten was a great Van der Graft generator, so that's part of. I've heard of that band. So look, yeah, it's like some jazz music just doesn't do it for me, and some jazz does. I think the great thing about these 3-chord bands, you know, the Sex Pistols and the Ramones, is that it certainly gave everybody who was thinking about forming a band the incentive to get out there and play some music, and I think that's well documented that they did that, and they said it themselves that all they knew was 4 chords, but they wanted to get out there and have a crack, and they were lucky enough to do it. And the energy, yes, certainly was great. I remember, you know, watching. This is a few years later because I wasn't, you know, I was young when the Sex Pistols came out, but I remember, you know, watching a famous interview, and they're sitting there, and they're being interviewed by this English guy, and they're swearing on the BBC. You know, they're telling the guy to go and get effed, and they're calling him a dirty old man or something dirty, and it's great.
Well, the other thing too is what we have to admire about the Sex Pistols and Ramones and that movement. Also, it was in basically a protest against new wave and crap and glam and discos and polyesters and disco balls and that sort of movement too. They wanted to, you know, they weren't down with that sort of. So in a way, they weren't really putting the Stones down. They were just kind of like treat them like, you know, just I guess almost like a just a bit of a ribbing, a bit of an elbowing.
Well, Johnny Rotten's on documented giving grief to Pink Floyd. He's saying, "Who listens to Pink Floyd? We don't give a crap about Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd can go and get Pink Floyded." You know, yeah. You know, people don't listen to that Pink Floyd stuff. So yeah, and he probably had the album at home, but yeah, Van der Graaf, yeah, part of that Canterbury music, Simon, Canterbury progressive. There's a few bands, yeah, I think they call it Canterbury sound or something. But yeah, I look, yeah, no one's denying that they had the energy, and you know, and you know, Sid Vicious couldn't play a bass, and he's, you know, it's well documented, and Gary Oldham does a very good version of him standing there just trying to play something and spitting on people, and yeah, not me. It's not me.
Yeah.
But yeah, pretty cool.
But what's cool about this, and we'll talk about this next week because this coincides with some more songs that I'd like to mention when I won't have time today, is another movement that was going on around that same time, which was an interesting period, that late 70s, early 80s, was rockabilly was getting another little revival going on.
Mate, in New Zealand, I'm a rockabilly rebel from head to toe. That was #1 for 6 weeks.
Was that late 70s, was it?
That would have been 79. I was a young guy, but I remember, was that Captain Matchbox, or do you?
Don't know anything about it.
Well, I'm a little bit older than you. But Captain Matchbox or Matchbox. But yeah, you're right. There was a bit of that rockabilly going on.
Yep. And the Stones knew it because their 81 tour, they did a couple of Eddie Cochran covers, 20 Flight Rock and Go Into a Go-Go or something else. So it was interesting.
He was huge in the UK and Britain, Eddie Cochran, huge.
Yeah. No, very, very good. So yeah, a lot of stuff going on late 70s, and the Stones knew that there was that, that they had, there was a lot of different genres and bands, and a lot of creative stuff going on, a lot of crap obviously, but they could match it with the best of them, throw something at them, and they could pull something off. Whether it be disco, whether it be funk, whether it be reggae, whether it be punk, you name it.
Okay, well, there's two songs I remember vividly as a young guy. And one knocked my socks off, and that was "Start Me Up." I remember hearing that in '81, hearing that riff, and I fell in love with it. I hopped on my push biked into town, and bought the 45 record, and came home and played it for days. And another song I remember around that same time is "Ding Ding 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 Ding," "Emotional Rescue."
Yeah.
And I remember listening to, and I couldn't get it. I was trying to work out in my young mind what was this.
Yep. Disco funk. Wasn't rock. Bill Wyman's bass line's incredible. Mick Jagger, like you said, is theatrical sing, "I'll be your knight in shining armor."
Yeah, but it was the lyrics, man, that like I remember, I'll be your knight in shining armor. I will come to you and your emotional rescue. Yeah, how old was I? What are these guys singing about?
Works though. No, it was just an interesting period, but a good period.
So Emotional Rescue came out in '80, didn't it? Came out before Tattoo You.
Well, yeah, a bit of a sleeper album. I don't own it, never owned it, probably will never own it. There's a couple of 2 or 3 good things on there. It definitely didn't get the accolades like Some Girls and Tattoo You. It was definitely people thought of it as a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, I'm of that group. I remember last December giving myself some homework and listening to that album and trying to make some connections with that album was one of my projects, and I couldn't build too many bridges on that album.
Yes. So yeah. Yeah. Besides that song and maybe 1 or 2 other catchy little things, there was a lot of filler in there, eh? And it's incredible that Tattoo You, which was their one of their biggest albums of all time, next to Some Girls, and was half of it was B-sides and demos from 10 years ago. Waiting on a Friend, I think, was from the Exile period, and Start Me Up will start as a reggae song.
Yeah, yeah, they did apparently in Rotterdam or something like that. But Waiting on a Friend, because you have to remember that when that album came out, there were a lot of videos. You know, video was the big thing, wasn't it? And
MTV kicked off about 1980, 81.
Yep, and that with our if you can see that there.
Oh, cool! That's
can you see that? Look how cool Keith is.
Yeah, that's a very, very good. Not only a very good video, but it just shows you once again their infatuation with New York and America. I think that was filmed in Manhattan or Bronx or Queens.
I tried to look like that. I can't believe I tried. Yeah.
It's hard to look like that.
I tried.
Well, part of that look came about Keith always trying to cover his big ears.
Yeah. Gosh, he was cool. Well, he still is.
Mm.
You're Waiting on a Friend. Here we go. Recorded 72. And then they did a 75 version.
Wow.
And then 1980. And then a New York City version in 81.
Cool.
So there's a few. Just imagine what their outtakes must be.
Mm. And all their leftover songs that are still half done or you know, just thrown by the wayside. So many gems still not presented. Just a body of work. Tattoo You was an album of fillers. Incredible.
In the 72 version, Mick Taylor was also on guitar, as Charlie Watt recalls. On Waiting on a Friend, he went into that Santana style of playing. It was incredible, and it really worked. Man, I want to hear that.
Who's got the version? Who owns it?
I don't know.
Did Start Me Up start off as Don't Stop? Started something like Don't Stop, didn't it?
Hold on, buddy. Before becoming an iconic Stones track, Start Me Up underwent a long development process. Start Me Up, reggae song recorded in Rotterdam 3 years earlier. So that's one version. So 77, there's a 77 version, an 81 version, and an 81 version. Yeah. What immediately comes to mind when one thinks of Start Me Up is the superb intro played by Keith and Open G. Yeah, well, that's just that got me, and that's before I even knew what Open G tuning was.
If only I knew what it was when I started, I'd be a legend. Mm.
The Stones played a huge number of takes of the song, around 70.
Of which song?
Start Me Up.
Wow.
Most of them reggae, but Richards was still not happy with the result. After they cut it, I said, that's bloody great. Come on and listen. However, when I played it back, Keith said, nah, it sounds like something I've heard on the radio. Wipe it. of course, I didn't, but he really didn't like it, and I'm not sure whether he likes it to this day.
Mm.
So the band dropped "Start Me Up" completely, and it wasn't. Wow. So that's the song that they play in American music, American sports stadiums.
Yeah. Oh, it's with sports teams with intros.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's and as we know, when Steve Ballmer, the Microsoft guy, when they launched, I think in 1999 or 2001, some kind of app or some kind of computer or
Windows 95, I think.
yeah, and there's a famous YouTube clip, and I think he jumps out of a box or jumps on stage. This bald guy, fat guy, and Start Me Up's in the background. You know, it's the most popular songs for sports bands is "Welcome to the Jungle," "Start Me Up," "Crazy Train."
We Are the Champions.
Yeah. But yeah, but no, I really like that period. A lot of people call it commercial. I think it's great.
Well, I think what we have to do is we have to look at like you've mentioned, you know, with the whole series. You have to look at the Stones that in as chapters, I suppose. Yes, you've got that classic period. You've got the classic period. You've got that English. What do you call it? That English beat period. You know, where with with
Brian Jones.
Brian Jones. You know, um, yeah, and then you've got the Ronnie Wood. Yeah, all great chapters.
Yeah, yeah. They and it's incredible just the longevity. I mean, my favourite period was obviously the start to 81. So that's 7 and 10 and 1, 18 years of, I think, being at the top. And as we know, they've been going for, what, 45 years?
50.
50 years? Wow, 50 years.
Voodoo Lounge got me in '95. I was a fan of Voodoo Lounge.
Okay, yeah. Don't know much about all that sort of stuff, but they always can surprise you some way or another. So, yeah, yeah. And the one thing about Some Girls and Tattoo You is there's not one dud song. True to the Stones and them releasing albums, not songs or singles, they put a lot of effort into a song which created a album. So there was no filler, none. Start to finish, those albums are legendary.
Yeah, and Bridges to Babylon. Yeah, yeah. There's some good stuff on there too.
Mm.
Yeah, I think you have to. I've had this conversation with a few people in the Facebook Sticky Fingers Facebook group where some oldies are saying, you know, that they haven't listened to anything since '81. And I've said, well, look, I can appreciate that, I can understand that, but I think, you know, if you're telling me that you're a Stones nut and you love the Stones and you think Keith Richards is great, you have to, you've got to listen to Bridges to Babylon. You have to listen to Voodoo Lounge. You don't have to listen to Dirty Work though.
Yeah. No, no, no. It was a. I mean, I remember. Did you read Anthony Kiedis's autobiography, Scar Tissue?
No.
Okay. Well, my sister sent it to me when I was overseas, and I didn't like what he said. I liked the album Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and I liked some of this Chili Pepper stuff, but a little bit disrespectful. I think one of the tours in the mid 90s or early 90s, Chili Peppers were on the same bill.
Oh, really?
Yeah. One of the tours, the Chili Peppers were there, and he said something about, he'd like the fact that when they were the opening act, that there was a whole bunch of lawyers and accountants and established people in the crowd who were there for the Stones. And I'm like, well, that's just how it is. Young people get old and get careers. So, yeah. And obviously, the Stones can't have teenagers going crazy over them all the time. But testimony to the Stones, there's 3-4 generations that watch them now. So, yeah.
I've had that conversation too, in regards to Clapton. I can't remember. I think it was with someone we know, and they were going on about how when you go and watch Clapton, people sit there in the front, and they're the $5,000 seats, and these people are sitting there and they're watching Clapton, and they've got the bogans further on back, and I said to Wayne, I said to him, well, what do you expect? These people are probably 60, 70 years old too. They've been fans of Clapton from the beginning. So, the hardcore fans grow up too.
Yep. And Anthony Kiedis may have to eat some humble pie. I guarantee you, if he did a show now with his fan base that started with him, in the concert would be some school teachers, some lawyers, some accountants who were rebellious and funked out, drug addict little kids who are now fathers and mothers and got careers. So you've got to grow up. You have to. If you don't grow up, then what are you? So, yeah. Hey, I don't mind going to a show with a whole cross-section of people. I'd rather go to a show with a cross-section of people than a whole bunch of angry young bogans that yell and stink. I want to listen.
Yeah, I wanted to listen too. I want to go and watch a band, and I was watching a show last night where we were talking about that reference. Some of these guys were talking about rap artists, for example, and they weren't putting the boot into rap artists, but you have to bear in mind that the show that we were watching, it's a guitar-orientated show, so naturally 99% of the people participating on that show and in the chat want to go and watch bands. They want to see a guitar player, they want to see a singer, they want to see a drummer, and going to watch somebody standing, singing or rapping is a foreign experience for guys like you and I and a lot of other people who want to go and watch a band.
Absolutely.
I'd walk out. I've got no desire whatsoever to go and watch one guy stand there and rap at all.
Well, it's a culture, and unfortunately, it's the demise of people playing instruments. It's all based on lyricism and battle rapping, and it started out as street poetry, and it started out as an art form, but it's just become diluted and polluted.
Well, we've got rap and blues. I'm listening to Volume 2 of Blues Jam in Chicago by Fleetwood Mac, and some of the guys that they're rapping. You can hear it. You can hear the embryo of rap, obviously, in the blues, obviously, clearly.
You're talking about just the studio ad lib, the jive talking between.
Yeah. So and then obviously that's performed to gone to where it is now. But the problem that I have with it, and again, I don't want to be considered an old fart having a crack at modern music, but the point is, it's all done by record producers now. There's a young guy. One of my friends sent me a link of this young guy who's got rainbow teeth, and he's got hair, and he's got rainbow coloured hair, and he looks like, and he's got tattoos all over him, and he got shot recently, and he's recovering in jail. And so everybody's not talking about his music. They're talking about the fact that this guy got shot.
Tekashi 6ix9ine is his name.
That's him.
And it's all image. He's known for all those fruity colours. And they have what's called a grill, which is goes over their teeth, and he's got a rainbow colour.
That's it.
He doesn't have enough talent to actually go on stage in his normal hair and his normal face with no tattoos and just playing clothes and sing. He has to turn himself into a freak. And that's what all music is now.
Well, that's precisely my point. So these 75-year-old guys like Mick Jagger, who incidentally celebrated his 75th birthday 3 days ago.
Is that right?
Still touring, still performing. 75, man.
Out.
What are you and I going to be doing when we're 75?
That's unbelievable. Okay, here we go. I'll just bring up a picture. Mick Jagger's 75th birthday. Poses with his 4 sons to ring a milestone. Yet baby Devereaux 1 is less than pleased. How many kids does he have?
Well, he's just, obviously he's read the Bible and, took that Bible verse, go forth and be fruitful, literally.
See, it's quite funny because
good C of E, man.
when we work together, we'd see some of those. I won't mention what you call them over the airwaves, and bandsaw blade guys, and some of those guys were 60, and they looked like they were 90, just how they carried themselves.
Yes.
So Mick Jagger is a testimony to. He's realises he's old, but he's got a youthful way about him, which is great. He's not pretending to be youthful. He's just carries himself well. But a lot of that's a sense of humour and just a zest for life and a zest for people and humility. Well,
Simon's making a point here. Music today is so desperate today that music you like is difficult to find. It still exists, but it's not mainstream. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's one of the great things about YouTube, Simon, and Spotify, that there are some young cats out there playing some blues, and they're not going to get the radio. And it's been a theme that Carl and I have spoken about before, that this is not dissimilar to what was happening in the late 50s with the record producers owning individuals and telling individuals what they should do, and then bands came along and broke that mold. So we'd like to think that there is a band out there that's going to come again and break the mold. But I also think modern music too today is a reflection of the rubbish that's going on in society. Music, because we are musicians, we are guitar players, we know that we've got documented proof that the bands that we follow were influenced by what was happening in their society. Street Fighting Man, as an example, the Beatles album, Sgt. Pepper's, was a album that was reflecting a mood, a movement. So I think the music that young people are listening to today is reflecting a mood and a movement.
Well, it's I was talking to a guy about 10 years ago in America. He mentioned the word, which to a lot of people is probably a big word, but it's a fairly common word. Everybody suffers from instant gratification. People want to be a star straight away. They've got no talent. The audience wants to see something shocking, and they just are told what to listen to, and they're sheep. And it's just crazy when you have a wedding or a birthday or a get-together or reunion, when all the oldies come out, the classics, people love it. And it's almost like they don't even have to listen to it. They just tune into it.
nobody's listening to these anymore, Carl. Nobody listens to these anymore. No one's listening to an album. What people do now is they just listen to one song. They listen to one song. That's it.
Streaming.
Yeah. So yeah, that instant gratification, that instant, like, listen to that song, this background music that's going on, this boom boom boom.
And I tell you what, a lot of the songs that are so-called number ones now, in 10 years or 5 years even, will not stand the test of time. They will be just absolute throwaway songs.
Well, yeah, but what one of the things I want to ask Simon when he comes onto the show, being an Englishman, is what was the popular music that he was listening to? It's hard for me to think of Fleetwood Mac, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, as being popular music. It was, Cream being popular music.
Yeah, it's a sign of the times. It's very much. I don't think the producers respect the artists. I think the artists don't respect themselves. I think there is a lot of. I think fame is a drug. Fame is definitely a drug. Everything associated with fame is what people want. Which is obviously the money and the girls and the status and the attention. No one wants to do hard work.
I don't know anything about these modern guys. I have had some interesting conversations with people on social media about a band called Greta Van Fleet.
Yeah,
these are young cats, Americans who make absolutely no apologies about being inspired by these guys here. In fact, if you listen to just about all that, you can hear some Page, and I think we've discussed this before on the show. And the drummer's got a drum kit set up exactly like Bonham. But these guys are 22, 23 years old, and they're playing rock and roll. And instead of people like me saying, this is great, wow, hail Greta Van Fleet, people are saying, oh, but they're ripping off Led Zeppelin. Give these guys a break.
Here we go. Here's a Facebook post, and we talked about the disco era, and we talked about Tattoo You in '81. Getting back to Greta Van Fleet, I still haven't listened to them, but I did notice on the they are getting some attention on the airwaves and media, which is good.
Are they?
In American news outlets are picking them up. So hopefully they'll get a shot on maybe the late night shows. That's always a good platform for bands to get exposure.
Well, here's something interesting. Sonia, when she was 17, she was listening to Zappa, Black Sabbath, Captain Beefheart, and Steppenwolf. Now, just imagine that's the music she was listening to. Wow.
Well, this is pretty sad because at this particular time in '85, we would have thought this was catchy but crap. But this is just gold compared to what we have now. The top hits of 1985: Careless Whisper, Wham, like a Virgin, Madonna, Wake Me Up Before You Go, Go Wham, I Want to Know Love Is Foreign, a good song, I Feel for You, Chaka Khan, Out of Touch, Hall and John Oates, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, Tears for Fears, Money for Nothing, Dire Straits, great song, Crazy for You, Madonna, okay, Take on Me, Aha, good song.
Mate, I've got to tell you something. I love that Tears for Fears album. Everybody wants to. That's just, I love that.
Yep.
Sorry.
Away, Paul Young. He was good, Paul Young.
He could sing. He had that raspy voice, man.
Blue-Eyed Soul, yep. Easy Lover, Phil Collins and Philip Bailey, not a bad song. Can't Fight This Feeling, REO Speedwagon. We Built the City, Starship.
Great song.
The Power of Love, Huey Lewis and the News.
So that was popular music in 85.
Yep. Don't You Forget About Me, Simple Minds. Cherish, Cool the Gang, St. Elmo's Fire, John Parr. The Heat Is On, which reminds us of American movies. Glenn Frey, and We Are the World, USA for Africa.
What a great cross-section of musical genres.
And that's 1985. So we would have considered that catchy, but radio hits. But that, compared to what we have now, that is classic.
Yeah.
It just goes to show you that what we used to put down is actually very good. I mean, that doesn't hold up to the Stones or the Beatles. But what I'm trying to say is we're seeing I wouldn't say a drastic, but a very steady decline.
So, Simon said that Tears for Fears came from Bath, 20 miles from him. Yeah, that was that album, Everybody Wants to Rule the World. They had a couple of, that was huge. Shout, let it. Yeah. But that Everybody Wants to Rule the World. I remember going to a friend's place, and he put it on and turned it up, and to the drumming, and the bass, dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
What's that song? Sowing the seeds of
love. See, yeah. I think that was on a second album. Yeah, they're pretty good.
Quite a trippy song. That was
actually.
If you listen to it, it was very Sgt. Peppery, very psychedelic. So yeah. But to answer your question, I don't know what's going on. Call me an old fossil, call me a fool, call me whatever you like. I just know what I like, and I'm not going to change.
No, and that's good. I think the irony for me, though, over the last couple of days is having to defend young cats like Greta Van Fleet on Beatles and Rolling Stones groups from old farts like you and I who want to kick them in the guts because they're ripping off Led Zeppelin, and going, well, they've never.
Do you know where it comes from, though? And I've seen it amongst my peers, and I might have been guilty of it a long, long time ago. It's said from sheer ignorance, because the people saying it don't actually really know what's going on. So when people say something undermining or cynical, it's because they've got nothing to back it up with. So they fail to see the bigger picture. They don't, yeah.
Which sums up 90% of social media.
Pretty much, absolutely. I mean, obviously, and Keith's never really been much of a fan. A lot of people don't like the music critics critique, the constructive criticism, and the reviews. I know that they're a necessary evil, but a lot of the, like you mentioned, a lot of people that put people down don't actually have a clue what's going on.
Okay, I'll just give you another example. Like, I'm a Beatles nut. Okay, so I was checking out a Beatles group, and one young cat on there, he's asking this question. Did Yoko Ono contribute to the Beatles breaking up? And again, so you've got to stand back and take a deep breath, because you've got to work out, so who's asking this question? So the person who's asking this question is an 18-year-old, discovered the Beatles, is trying to get as much information as possible, instead of saying, yeah, well, I think she did, or no, she didn't, or, and giving some examples, because we all have an opinion on whether or not she did or didn't, which is great. Opinions are great. But 90% of the comments, oh, here we go, this bullshit again. We've gone through this, we've explained this, and that's great if you have. But always bear in mind, if you're a music fan on social media and somebody asks a question that you've answered 50 times before, answer it 51 times, because that person will be probably 18 or 19 years old, who's trying to get some information from organic people. So be
Yep.
responsible and be cool.
And respectful, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. Because I've asked probably some, I wouldn't say rhetorical questions, but probably to other people, probably naive questions, but I didn't know and I wanted to know, you know, and that's, I mean, that's how you learn. If you don't ask, you don't know. If you don't answer, then you shouldn't be a fan. You shouldn't be involved.
Yeah, well. Again, I suppose the point that I want to draw out too is that we probably associate a type of person on social media who's saying these things may be young, but probably they're not. I think a lot of the people who are being cynical and rude are old farts.
Well, yeah. You can never stop learning. And some people are set in their ways and they think they know everything, but they don't. I mean, there's some stuff that we're still finding out about the Stones that they've. I mean, I was just for some reason, I don't want to get too far off topic. It was a YouTube video, 15 minutes long, about Eric Clapton talking about his experiences at the Royal Albert Hall. I didn't realise the Yardbirds played there. But he said, to be honest, I remember more about what we wore than what we played. And, you know, and then he obviously talked about the Cream period. He said that he didn't really thought the music was very good, you know, that sort of thing. But even he doesn't know, or if someone could tell him, he would appreciate it. You know, no one knows everything. We're all learning.
Oh yeah, and I love opinions. You know, have an opinion. It's great. You know, I'm admin on a couple of groups, and you know, I used to detest lists, but lists. You know, your top 5 guitarists. You know, I think we touched on this last week. Your top 10 drummers. You know, what guitar do you like? What, you know, on the Johnny Bean show last week is what's your favorite guitar? Strat Tele or Les Paul? You know, Strat one hands down. You know, we have to have lists and you know, to start a conversation, to have an opinion, but and don't be frightened, I suppose, of asking. You know, I've been blown away too. Simon and I were talking just the other day. We messaged each other. I didn't know that Led Zeppelin's first album, Jimmy Page used the Telecaster. I, for years, assumed it was a Les Paul. It wasn't until, you know, books started coming out and the advent of YouTube and the internet, well, oh, wow, it was a Telecaster.
That absolutely, and the other thing is, yeah, never be afraid to ask, because I'm finding out stuff all the time, stuff that I thought I knew and I didn't.
Oh yeah. So Simon's interest. I left that Strat group too. He joined a Strat group forum for a bit, but couldn't take the fury, so he left. I left that Strat forum when they started having a discussion around John Mayer's PRS on the Strat forums, and just the way that people were just conducting these comments at Simon, it just blew me away. It got So I left that group. I couldn't handle it.
And the other thing, if you're a true artist, whether it be music, film, fashion, anything, even how you carry yourself, your tastes change too, as well. So you've got to be careful what you say, because in 10 years' time, you'll contradict yourself. So it's better to say, I disagree, but I'm still learning myself, or I agree, but the jury's still out.
I'm quite happy, my friend, to say I've changed my mind when it comes to music. In fact, I love it when I surprise myself when you hear something that you wrote off, you know,
Absolutely.
years ago, and you hear it again, and you think, wow, actually, that's not bad.
Yep. 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 I was the biggest Robert De Niro fan, and I've always been. It's always bothered me. Who's better, Robert De Niro or Al Pacino? I was a massive Robert De Niro fan. Then I realized he got into politics and his movies. He kind of got stagnant, and I'm like, you know what? As I've gotten older, I prefer Al Pacino. And it's not that either is better. It's just as I've gotten older, my taste has changed.
Yeah, I dig that.
I'm using that point.
Yeah. And yeah, and I don't think people will be upset because you've changed your mind. I will always give someone a bit of grief. Here in New Zealand, Simon and Sonia, if you guys are still watching, we call it the needle. We'll give you a bit of the stick or something, or give you a bit of crack. But
There's another one saying a stick in the mud. Is it stick in the mud?
Yeah, well, yeah, giving someone a bit of grief. But on the Johnny Bean show last night, they were talking about concerts or bands or artists that they would walk out of, and one guy said he'd walk out of the Stones, or if the Stones are on the radio, they always change when the Stones are on. And I said, well, when Rush is on, I always change if Rush is on. But I said to the guy, how can you change when the Stones come on? Come on, man. You got to call yourself a guitar player. You can give someone a bit of grief like that, but I think to call someone a D head or a F wit.
Well, one of the best things that ever happened to me was I was a Stones nut. That's all I listened to. Best thing that happened to me was getting into Jimi Hendrix, and then R&B, then soul, and Etta James, and Wilson Pickett, Otis Redding, getting deeper and deeper into the R&B, then traveling to America, always using the Stones as my foundation. But I was in a rut. Everybody said, "Oh, that's that Stones guy that all just listens to the Stones," and I still love the Stones, but we all have to keep learning, and as my uncle would say, you got to cast the net a bit wider. If you're not, then how are you learning? So, yeah.
Or learn by going back and revisiting some of the stuff that you haven't listened to in that artist's catalog. To cast your net open or further. But I tried so many times, and I don't mind admitting this. I tried so many times to listen to Pink Floyd. There's a couple of songs of Pink Floyd I like.
Yes,
but I just can't get into Pink Floyd.
Well, it's drawn out. It's very much organ derived. It's very much theatrical. It's melancholy. It's all minor chords. It's basically depressing.
Well, when I was growing up, anyone who listened to Pink Floyd was a stoner. It was druggy music. That's, don't get me wrong. What's the guitar player's name?
David Gilmour.
It's phenomenal. I've got the Pulse DVD. Phenomenal guitarist.
He when they think of Strat heroes, he's in the top 10, if not the top 5.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not knocking him as a but as a complete package, Pink Floyd don't do it for me.
Nah, we're in the same boat. I'm a rocker, blues nut, blues man, soul man, jazz man. I don't mind the fact that I'm not necessarily in a rut, but I know what I like. But yeah, you can't like everything. And funnily enough, Pink Floyd's have their roots in the blues. They just got way out there in La La Land, but it worked for them.
Yeah. And
they got more for their stage shows, which was a little bit and electric lights and stuff. Their light shows
and mirrors on Sid's Telecaster, and they rolling ball bearings on the floor, and
and Bob Geldof with razor blades, and Tommy, and what was that movie that Pink Floyd did, or no, was that that was Who and Tommy? Yeah. They got just known for more just off the wall stuff. So
and it's all part of that English art school scene, which is really important, because all the guys that we venerate, 90% of them all went to British went to art school. So I all credit to the English art school system. But you're right. You can't like everything, and you either like what you like what you do. Like, I'm just trying to think though of something that I've changed my mind recently that I didn't like. I can't think of anything. Nothing's coming to my mind, because I've always dipped my toes in a lot of things.
I mean, your tastes change, and it's a bit like wine. You get more mature with age, and I mean, I've never listened to classical music, and I might like it one day.
Yeah, Sonia's talking about, and Simon in the chat, they're talking about Aqualung, Jethro Tull, Ian Anderson. That was again a phenomenal album, Aqualung. I remember my mate Garth Blomfield and another guy called Richard talking about that album in 1980, 81, when we were young guys, and that's before they were playing that stuff on the radio, on the classic hits. And Jethro Tull were, Led Zeppelin was here, Jethro Tull were there.
Close.
Yeah. As far as my friends were concerned, that knew them, that they were just about, just about on a par.
Well, I mean, those English guys, like we've talked about this a few shows back, could conjure up a medieval sound. The flute, Ian Anderson. I mean, the heavy riff, Aqualung, is quite a bit of a metal groove, and the funky bass and the drumming, just very talented guys. Obviously, very much folk based as well. Clever lyrics, just true artists, really. Psychedelic album covers, and I mean, don't forget the album cover of the wino, the bum, on the park bench.
But these guys were just doing what they wanted as a band, as artists. They weren't, from my research, they weren't produced by a record company.
What would you think if you're at a show and there's a guy with an old trench coat and long hair and a hat like yours, a fedora, and he comes out jumping out with woolen scarves and slippers, and he pulls out a flute, and his name's Ian Anderson? You'd just be blown away, wouldn't you?
Absolutely, because he'd pull this flute out, it'll be mic'd somehow, so it would cut through the mix, and you'd be like, "This is the Pied Piper. I'm a mouse."
Well, and what I like about that music is if you're really into it, you don't have to be on drugs. You actually get high off the music, because the music's so out there. You become part of the cloud. All of a sudden, you grow wings.
Yeah. I again, and I think this is going to be one of the great things about our show, is that when we get Simon on, we make absolutely no bones about the fact that we admire 90% of the music that we love is from English guys. All credit to them. There's something about these guys that can take American music, bring it back over here, do something to it,
mix it up, give it their own taste, their flavor, take it back to America, and the American fans love it and don't realize where it came from, which was America initially.
And when they turn around and say, so who inspired you to be, all these American bands? Really? Well, who are these American bands?
No, it's these guys are. I got to revisit that Rock and Roll Circus, because even though the Stones played pretty average, I mean, there's some nuggets on there. There's some very much some moments in time that were etched in our minds, isn't there? Jethro Tull was on there with Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, and no, that was Taj Mahal, was it?
Yeah. See, Sonia's added something really interesting. I also enjoyed the album Tales from Tropographica Oceans by Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Rick Wakeman. Yeah, Yes, out again. Who was the guy that died recently? Passed away.
ELO?
No, from Yes.
Robin Trower?
No. He passed away. Gosh, it's on the tip of my tongue. Simon will know. But Yes, a great band. Progressive rock.
John Anderson was the singer. Was
Chris Squire.
Bassist Chris Squire.
Yeah, badass bassist, man.
What a shame.
Yeah, awesome.
Leukemia. Ouch.
Yeah. Just yeah. I was lucky enough to have an uncle, who turned me on to the Stones. Yeah, he was a big Yes fan, and just
because they called that prog rock, didn't they?
Yeah.
Prog rock.
Yeah, and I certainly was listening to it, and then they had that big song that came out in the early 80s. I'm trying to think, is it Owner of a Lonely Heart?
Possibly.
And then people were going back, because I remember guys I was hanging out with going, wow, and then checking out older stuff that they were doing. So that's great when I've listened to them. You don't want to come across as an older all the time, though, do you? Owner of a Lonely Heart, that's it.
What a neat song. Yeah. And then obviously you had your Foreigners and your... Wow, yes. Yeah, no, too good. I've missed a few phone calls. I have to wrap this up, unfortunately.
No, it's always a pleasure. As you know, we've how long have we been on for?
Hour and a half, at least.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. So I'm going to shout out first, and I'll leave the last read up to you. So Simon, always a pleasure. Thank you for your comments and your support. Sonia, always cool to catch up with you, and appreciate again your kind words and comments and support. Means a lot to Carl and I. To have you guys join us and contribute and steer us down some alleyways and some detours. We love it. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Cool. No, great. Another good little chapter. Another good little segment in our continuation of the Rolling Stones, their influences, what's influenced us, and everything else in between, which happens to be today many bands, yes, and 70s R&B and all. Just that's the great thing about music. There is no stop or start. It's continuous. Just want to say thank you again to Andrew for the motivation behind the show, and all the people listening, and just looking forward to maybe one or two jumping in and adding another to the mix. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously too, Sonia. You've joined us a couple of times in the chat, so there's always an invitation for you to jump on if you want to hang out with us and talk about your musical experiences. Just give us a yell.
What would be too was it was before my time. Is if maybe we're fortunate enough along the way to get someone on the show or the chat live who's actually was at some of these 60s shows or early 70s shows.
Simon has been.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Simon thinks he's only going to do one show with us, but we've got, I've already warned him. We've got a lot of questions.
Obviously, I was too young I wasn't even born in the early 70s and the 60s, obviously, but by the time it became old enough to be at a Stone show, it was probably Steel Wheels but I would love to ask someone a question about, or if they can remember, hey, what was it like? Please tell me.
Yeah, and the same with you too, Sonia. Being in North America, you probably would have seen a lot of these bands. Yeah. I would have loved to have seen the Stones during their golden period. I saw them in the Voodoo Lounge. It was great, but I won't say any more. All right. We'll see you guys later.
We'll see you next week. Thanks.